Right. So say you have two children and you take the one child and you praise them and you tell them, hey, you're so awesome, give them a high five. Every time they come to you, you smile, you tell them they are brave, you tell them they are strong. You praise them when they do things. And you just, you give them everything, your time, your money, and you give them your support. Now, what if you did not do this for the other child? It's not that you said anything negative. You didn't say like, you're a terrible kid, or, like you didn't even frown. You just didn't give them the positive feedback for the things that they were doing. Now, how would this affect those two children over time? And let's say that you did it long term. Let's say you praised the one child and you didn't praise the other child. And now let's say even worse. Let's say that you actually said negative things about the one child. So you said, like that they are violent. Let's say they are angry. And of course, at the very extreme would be toxic. They are toxic. Now, how would that affect? We know, because we know child development and we have a lot of data on this. So we know exactly what will happen. What will happen is essentially what you're creating, the dynamic you're creating is well studied. And it's the golden child and the scapegoat. Now, the scapegoat, you don't have to deliberately say things to scapegoat a child, to essentially destroy their self-esteem, create a very negative mindset. And often we know that when a child is ignored and when the other child is praised, we know that long term that increases the chances of teen pregnancy. It increases the chances of suicide, of prison. It greatly decreases the chance that child will go to school, get an education, and go to college and succeed in life in general. It has a huge effect long term on that child's success in life. And these things can be measured. We know that. So it doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl. If you praise one child and you don't praise the other, that in itself is very damning, because the other child, let's just say it's two girls, the other child will think, she's beautiful. What about me? Hey, I'm beautiful, mommy, And then the mommy doesn't say anything. And she looks at the other one. You're very beautiful. You're so brave. You're so beautiful. And the other child, by default, feels that they are being called ugly because they're not being treated equally. They're not being praised. Okay? They're being ignored. And children, they want to please their parents. It's one of the inherent hardwired instincts in children, even with very, very abusive parents. Even if the parents are, could be drug addicts, alcoholics, the child will do everything in their power to make things good at home until they realize that it's hopeless. And then they'll do the opposite. But we know because science, we've studied children development, and we have a lot of data on this. So by praising the one child, you are destroying the other child. But it's not intuitive, right? Because you say, well, I'm just saying something good about the one child. Like, what's wrong with that? I want to raise the self-esteem of this one child. The problem is that both children need that. Both children need to be supported. Both children need to be loved. Both children need to be believed. Both children need to be praised. Both children need time. They need attention. They need your very, very valuable time with them. And if you don't give that to one child, the effects are extremely negative, right? And we know that. Okay, so what I think we have developed in society, and one of the basics, misunderstandings about feminism, is the belief that this is not true. So if you praise women, let's do it with women and men. So if you praise women, is that boys will have that will not affect boys. Boys will be fine. Like praising women, making campaigns to raise women up, advertising campaigns, write books that talk about how valuable women are, how beautiful women are, TV shows, cartoons, like I said, education campaigns. But it goes so deep because feminism, I think this was a blind spot, and I understand it. I don't think there was anything, nefarious here. I honestly think that people just didn't think about it. And I just had this realization this morning, is that it's very similar to two children. And boys need love. Boys need belief. Boys, human beings are inherently comparison machines. Okay, so if I hand you a very heavy ball and then I hand you a very light ball, right? Your memory of the two will compare. There's a study, I can't think of it right now, but basically they were handing different weights of things, and carrying a heavy thing before influenced how heavy you thought the next one was. So you might have thought it was but much lighter than it was, because the other one that you just carried was so heavy. So it's the comparison is that is what sticks in the mind of humans. Humans are not as logical or fact-based as we think. We are always making comparisons. So is it hot or cold outside? Am I being, you know what I mean? Is it safe? Is it not safe? Is this food better or worse than last time? Am I important compared to other people? So when we compare ourselves, if we say, am I a valuable person? We're not saying compared to the world, we're comparing ourselves to other people. Just like in any company, salesmen are comparing themselves to each other. Number one salesman, he's not comparing himself to another company. He's comparing himself to that company, right? And that's how our minds work. That's how children think. That's how adults think. So boys have been watching women be praised, watching attention be focused on women. And again, I don't think there was any negative intent. I really don't even think people understand, even to this day, what's happening. But what from the boy's perspective, the boy is being ignored. Okay, so the dynamic is similar to a golden child and scapegoat. So one of the worst things you can do for children is to favor one child over the other. So it doesn't matter in the end if anybody gets a horse or if anybody gets money or if anybody gets a trip. What matters is that the children feel that they're being treated fairly. And we see this with monkeys too. When monkeys were given, one monkey was given less grapes than the other monkey, that monkey started very violently in their cage. Because it wasn't the amount of grapes, it was the comparison to the other monkey. So if you gave none of them grapes, the monkey didn't go crazy. But if you gave one monkey 2 grapes and the other monkey 1 grape, that made the monkey go crazy because he's comparing. He's looking at the other monkey saying, he has 2 grapes. I only have 1. So we are comparison machines as human beings. It's just the way we are. So giving the one monkey 2 grapes, we can understand that. We get that, right? But somehow, when it comes to men and women, we don't understand that. We don't accept that we are comparison machines. That boys and girls are looking at how the other children are treated. Now, a boy, let's say a little boy, he doesn't even see sex. When we're little, we don't understand. Children, infants, toddlers, young children, we don't even understand a lot of things about life, obviously. But we do understand very clearly how we're being treated compared to other kids. So children, in addition to the desire to be to make their parents happy, they really have this great need. And if you look back in your own life, if you remember, like when things were fair, you felt good about it. Whereas if one of your siblings got a very expensive present and you got a very cheap one, it's not that you got a cheap one. It's or even maybe it was a pretty good present. But if another sibling got a big present that was really expensive and you didn't feel it was fair, that's very difficult on a child. I remember one particular present, and this is not any damnation. It's just that this always in life, we're always going to have these things that come out unfair. One child wants this, the other child wants that, and different prices, and kids need different things. I'm not saying anything real about this one, but I'm just saying that there was a present I felt was unfair as a child, and it really bothered me. I remember for years, it bothered me. I wanted a motorcycle. My sister wanted a horse. She got a horse, and I got a bicycle. Now, the bicycle was actually really awesome. It was a great bike. I used the hell out of that bike. But my neighbor, Greg, he got a motorcycle. And then my sister had the horse. And I felt like it was unfair. I remember as a child, I felt like, I knew the horse, had a lot of monthly expenses. I knew the horse, was a big deal, right? It was a living thing. It was a huge thing. And I had a bicycle. And I knew that the bicycle was much less expensive than the horse, And, the bicycle was not even, let's say, two months of rent for the stable. So as a child, I felt that was very unfair, because I didn't get an equal present. Now, obviously, children are going to have their own opinions, and you can't be a perfect parent. But I remember, I'm just saying this story because I remember the incredible strong feelings I had about that. I just felt it was very unfair, at the time. Now, I was quite young, obviously. And I understand, as an adult, what's going on. But at the time, I didn't. I didn't understand it at all. So the fairness that you treat children is something that they take very seriously. And they start to make connections. This is one of the problems with children, is that they start to make connections that aren't there. So, for example, a child will blame themselves when their parents get divorced. And this is just absolutely a fact. They think, the first thing the child will think is that I should have cleaned up my room. I should have eaten my vegetables. I should have done my homework. I made mommy and daddy angry. I made them fight. And now, they're divorced. And, that is the very first thing a child thinks. Because their brain is not fully logically developed yet. So they don't understand, obviously, relationships. They don't understand their place in their family. And they don't understand that it had nothing to do with them. They were just a kid. You were just being their thing. And their parents, decided to get divorced. But this, and it takes, if you do get divorced, you have to go out of your way to really make sure the kid understands. I mean, it's not intuitive, right? How is that possible? The kid could think it's their fault, but that's how kids think. Kids make these connections. And so as an adult, as a parent, you have to go in and say, to your child, you have to make sure they understand that it's not their fault, right? It's not their fault that you got divorced, And they say, well, I should have done this. It's like, no, this is, and you have to give them some examples where they understand, like, this is not related to you. Like, see the ocean today? It's all stormy. But that has nothing to do with your homework, You have to think of ways to kind of explain it. So, like some things that you do don't relate to other people do, or things that happen in the world. They're not caused by this. And you have to kind of show the child in examples and take time and love to make the child understand. And of course, if they believe this, it's more difficult because they have a belief. But you can work on that, right? And it's your job as a parent to understand these things. Now, what I think is society is basically negating their job to understand the complexities of how things are turning out right now. And I believe, even though it's totally counterintuitive, I am very pro treating women awesome. I am. I always was, and that will not change. I like people. I'm a very people person. But I think men are being destroyed. Literally destroyed. We see it in the suicide. Men commit suicide. I don't know what the rate is. It depends on the country, but as much as 6 times women. And we see men going to jail. We see a lot of things happen. We see a lot of negative effects. I'm not going to go too much into it. I didn't prepare that part. But we see today, basically the men's movement is here for a reason. And this is one of the beliefs that people have, is that the men's movement must be negative. It must be anti-women. And I think a lot of men too, they're like very ginger about this, very careful, because they don't really, men have strong feelings right now, but they can't really put it into words. So one of my jobs with this channel is to try to put this into words so you can understand, is that men are essentially, boys and men are not getting love. Women are being favored over them. And this is having a huge effect on men. Huge effect. Very negative effect. And I believe, obviously, on society in general, anytime you have a very negative effect on half the population, you're going to have a negative effect on the other population, right? On the other half. It is a negative thing. Hurting men does not help women. And hurting women does not help men. Okay, so we work together. We raise each other. We're in families. We have children. The children can be the other sex. We can have parents we love. We can have relatives we love. Teachers can be men or women. So it's not an either or, plus or minus thing. It's about how do we make things, obviously, I understand society's desire to make things fair. This is very positive, actually. And in that desire, I made this episode, because we need to look at how this is happening, because it's not intuitive. If you say, I'm lifting women up, right? We have this campaign to help women, to make women strong, to do this, to do that. It seems very positive, right? You're like, how could that be negative? I want you to take a moment to really think about this one, and just always take it down to the simple, to children. 2 children, 2 parents. It doesn't matter what sex they are. Remember that. It's not about sex. It's about favoritism and the negative effects of not being favored. And I would say also the negative effects of being favored, because if you look at the dynamics, let's say of abused children, or with anytime you have a personality disorder with one of the parents, what you will often have in the dynamic is the scapegoat child and the golden child. These are the two. The one can do no wrong, and the other one is basically, scapegoat was blamed for all the ills of the village and sent out to go get eaten or killed outside with no protection, right? Because it took the sins, it took all the negative things from the village. They would even write them down and put them on the goat's back. And then it would go out, and that was the scapegoat. It was sacrificed for the like the good of the whole. It took all the sins, even though the sins were not that goat's, they were other people's sins. But the goat would take that away from the village, right? So scapegoat is a very crude, very negative effect, and this is essentially what's happening on a large scale. Is that men are being scapegoated. Now, it's important to understand that to scapegoat a child, you don't have to say anything. 90% of human communication is not verbal. So if I look at you and I frown, and I look at somebody else and I smile, I'm saying something much deeper than words. I am showing you that I don't value you. Okay, so the most powerful things are not the actual things themselves. They're these more subtle things. So it's not the things. Okay, here's where it goes deep. It's not the campaigns that are causing this. It's not the the measures that feminism will support. So let's say that the feminism supports something where women get into a school easier than men, or that's a bad example. Let's just say something like engineering. You give women a leg up, so it's easier for them to get a job in engineering, or you demand that half of the boards, like California did, the board of directors are women. So when you do something like that, so again, the thing is I understand that this is done in the spirit of making things equal. I totally understand that. And in fact, I agree with that. The problem is you have to look at how this thing really works out. So what happens, and also I want to say too, and this is what's happening. This is one of the more pernicious parts of it. You start with the specifics. Okay, so you treat women good. You treat the one child. Let's go back to the one child. The two children, treat one child. You're very brave. We're very proud of you. High five, big smile. Let me hug you. And you do a lot of things to make that child feel good. Now, you don't do it for the other child because there's no system. Because you're trying to bring that child up for some reason. And the other child's going to be fine in your mind. You think that praising and treating one child differently than the other is not going to have effect on the other child. Let's say you're totally blind. You don't understand how the brain develops, how humans are, human need for this stuff. And also humans' inherent, like comparison machine that we have. How are they compared to me? Am I okay? We look around us to see if we're okay. Am I okay? I look around how people treat me. If a group, one of the most painful things for anybody is to be ostracized. Okay, so ostracized, what is that? Are you physically doing anything? Are you saying anything? No, you're not noticing. You're not paying attention to. The person feels irrelevant. They feel invisible. Now, this is the exact opposite of feeling like you're loved. Feeling that people, the feeling that you get from when people pay attention to you, when people support you. There's this great feeling that you have, and a feeling of hope, and a feeling of you can see it in people's postures. You can see it in their actions. You can see it in, obviously, there's words like self-esteem and things like that we try our best to explain these things, right? But you see it in their physical body. You see it in the way they act. You see it in how they do in school. These things are very powerful. They often say, like, one of the most powerful things when a child falls down and injured is when the mother comes up or the father comes up and kisses the child's knee. That doesn't make any logical sense. Like the kiss probably increases chance of infection, But somehow the child's like, it's going to be okay. I'm loved. I'm cared about. Big deal. I'm fine. We're always looking for other people. We're pinging as human beings. We're always pinging. We're always looking for how we're being treated. Okay. So I made this episode for men and women. And I want for you guys, I want you to start to think about, and I think guys have a very difficult time with this. It's something that we're not used to demanding love and attention. Like guys think that we're basically immune to all this stuff. That we're somehow some kind of robots, and it's a sign of weakness that we need love, that we need attention, that we need positive adoration. But it's absolutely not true. If you look at the reality of life, is that humans are absolutely not above this stuff. It's absolutely essential to treat children fairly. And I would say even more than that, in many ways, human beings are always children. In some ways, you're exactly like you were when you were 10 years old. And any parent, if you ask any parent, you say, when did you know your child's personality? They often say, I knew right away. This child was so different than that child that you can see in people who they are. It's like at a very young age. And also, as they get older, they have the same needs. We have the same need for love. We need hope. Why do people commit suicide? Is they don't feel like there's any hope. They don't feel like no one pays attention and no one cares about them. They feel like their life they're invisible. They feel like their life has no meaning. They feel like they have no purpose. And it's a combination. And also they might feel hated. They might feel despised. They might just be more subtle. You know how in any group, if you watch any group of boys or girls, you look at the TV show Mean Girls, a lot of the stuff that the girls did was not even verbal. It was just this subtle thing. Men are now, without understanding what's going on, being excluded, being ostracized, and being fundamentally doubted as good people. And you can see this in words like toxic masculinity. It's impossible. Okay, this is such a terrible label. It really is. If you doubt this, you raise 2 children and you call one toxic and you see what happens. I'm serious about that. You tell the other one they're beautiful. You tell the other one they're toxic. So now I'm ramping it up to the reality of our life. It's not just preference for the female. It's worse. It's actually derision for the male. Now here's why it's impossible for the man. Why it's impossible for you. And a lot of times why the guys can't really understand what's going on. And what is the men's movement? What is birthing this thing? What is causing this thing? Is that not only are you not being paid attention to, you're not being loved, you're not cared about by society, but you are being labeled as toxic, as violent, as a negative net effect on humanity. And you see this, I tell you, it's really like, to me, I note these things when I notice them, because I was going to say earlier, actually, what happens when you do something long-term? What is propaganda? Like, what is brainwashing? Propaganda is you give people ideas over time in many different subtle ways, and eventually you're creating a belief in them. So you start with little things, and then you get them to believe these little things, and then you start to slowly create. At the end of propaganda, you have, and you see this in any kind of regime where the population has essentially been brainwashed into believing something, and you see that once it's a belief, it's impossible to change. Like, that's one of the problems that men are up against. Is it's not about the facts anymore. See, we're not talking about treating men fairly, or treating men well, giving men respect. We're talking about something much deeper and much more devastating that's already happened. Is that we've created a world where men actually feel this, because it's constantly reinforced to them. And I'll tell you how subtle this is from my study of child development. Let's look at a child. Okay, let's say that scapegoated child is a great example for this. And it's something that I'm very familiar with. So let's talk about a scapegoat child. Okay, so the scapegoat is basically blamed for the shame that the parent has. So if the parent has something they're ashamed of, okay, they're ashamed of the way, they are, maybe they were raised to be, a very tough. Let's say a man is raised to be very tough, and he went to war, and he fought, and he killed, and he did things that were like very brave, quote unquote brave. Now his child, let's say the boy, is scared, and he's like, "Daddy," he's crying. Now the dad, who doesn't want to face this part of himself, right? Who constantly denies this part of his self, his weak self, his fear, his lack of bravery, his cowardice, right? This is part of a man. We all have it, every part. It's all in there. It's all in there. But if a father is unbalanced, he will be really ashamed when his boy is weak. And that's why you see a lot of men, like getting really angry, for example, if their child is gay or something like that, because the father, if if they see that it's like a reflection of them. And this causes an unbalanced person to go ballistic and to basically start to scapegoat that child, because that child reminds them of something that they've tried to bury, something they're embarrassed of, or something that's just very touchy for them. They don't want this out. They don't want this, and they will praise the other child, right? And they will scapegoat the other child, trying to get them to change or trying to destroy them, either one. Now, what's happening in today's life is that, okay, now let's go back to the scapegoat. Okay, so this is actually important. Okay, so the scapegoated child is told they're wrong. Let's say all three children do something. They all do the same thing. But the one child is taken out and is blamed. Now, the other children will watch the scapegoat child and say to themselves, like, we all stole cookies. Like, why is the parent, taking that one child? Like, well, why is the parent blaming them for the stealing? Like, you led them, you started it, you did this. And let's say that the other children actually understand that's not true. Maybe even the other sibling actually, started the stealing the cookies, right? As if this is something bad. But you know how this is the dilemma of childhood, right? So there was cookies eaten. Oh no, children like cookies. They ate cookies. Oh, terrible, But anyway, back to the serious world of the children is they know that the child didn't really do anything. But how do they respond? So that they know the parent's being unfair. They know the one child didn't really do anything. But the kids who are always looking for an advantage, they want to be loved. Kids are always like at the same time is they want to be praised. They want to be the best. They want their parents' attention. They want their parents' love. So like, see, I'm faster. See, I can sing better. See, I'm taller. See, I'm this. I'm smarter. Kids always want to do that. And they're always in competition with the other kids, to get that attention, to get that adoration, to get that love. Now, they use this. The non-scapegoated kids eventually realize that there's no hope in going against the parent. So if they say, hey, mom, he didn't do it, I did it. And then the parent, who's not doing it rationally anyway, can turn around and actually scapegoat that golden child, because they're like, you got in the way of my program here. I had a good program. So the children quickly learn that the easiest way to survive is to blame the scapegoat. Okay, so they know the parent is going to respond well. So cookies stolen, he did it, she did it. And then the parent will go, okay, you guys go play, you guys go to the park. And they're like, you sit here, you don't do this. And the children, they take advantage of that. They're going to take advantage. Always children will try to find a way, right? And this works. Even though they know it's not fair, they know it's not right, they know it's not true, but they will still take advantage. And that's just the way children are. And one of your jobs as a parent, obviously, is to try to limit this kind of stuff. But it goes even worse than that. Next up is, let's say there's two children, one scapegoat. So in this example, you have an older scapegoat and then a younger child coming along. Now that that younger child will watch the parents. And again, they are comparison machines. They're watching the way the parents treat those two kids. And they're like, the parent is treating that child bad. So let's say in this case, in the first example, we knew that the child knew that they were the one that stole the cookies and the other one was blamed. And they tried to defend the other kid and they realized this was a losing battle. It's better to say, you're right, it was him. That was smarter. Now in this example, the kid is younger, the sibling is younger and doesn't really know how this whole thing started. All he knows is the parents are saying, he sees the parents often saying, like essentially the scapegoat is the one who causes the trouble, the one who causes the pain, the one who is a problem, the one who needs to be corrected, the one who brings difficulties, the one who gets daddy angry, all this stuff. And so the child, the very young child, will see that the parent is smiling at them and not smiling at the other one, and maybe yelling at the other one. So even though he doesn't know what's true, because he's too young, he didn't see what originally happened. He didn't see the dynamic that was starting, right? But it's almost like he's trained and brainwashed from infancy to think that the other child is bad, because he's watching the nonverbal things that the parent is doing. And then, now here's where it gets really bad. Here's where it gets so terrible, is the scapegoated child. Okay, so in this example, all the kids are the same, just for the example. And, you can read about scapegoat and golden child, and it's very evil. It's super terrible. But let's go in this case. The kids just are all the same, right? Exactly, goodness and badness, exactly the same. So you now treat one better than the other, and you treat the other one worse. Now, what happens next? What happens is, let's say the parents go out now. The parents are gone. They're going to eat, and there's a babysitter. Now, no one's watching now. And so the scapegoated child, how does he feel? How does the scapegoated child feel now? He feels angry because he knows it was unfair. He was there. He's older. He understands this is bullshit. He's like, we all stole fucking cookies, right? Now, of course, this is on a larger scale. We're talking about cookies times a million now. We're not talking about one pair of cookies. We're talking about his life as now as a scapegoat. And he knows his brother and sister do stuff just like him. And he's like, this is fucking bullshit. So of course he's very angry. Now, he is also a comparison machine. So what is he doing? He's looking at the other child and saying, you get treated better than me. So he's very angry. So what happens? What happens next? The scapegoated child is very angry. The dynamic is terrible here, because the scapegoated child is very angry at the other child. The scapegoated child doesn't understand that the parent created this dynamic that is essentially destroying the family. All the scapegoated child understands is that other kid is being treated better than him, and that it's not fair, and fuck this other kid, basically, right? So he's angry. So what he's going to do, he's going to go up to the golden child and he's going to hit him when no one's watching. So the parents are not there. He's going to steal some of his food because he's trying to get revenge. He's angry at the other child. Like you get treated well. Mommy and daddy pay attention to you. You get the big toys. You get all the fucking attention. You never get blamed for stuff. You get all the smiles. You get all the happy eyes. You get all the love. You get the better bed. The child is really angry because, again, we are comparison machines. Okay? Again, it doesn't matter if these are male or female. We're just talking about children here. Okay. So the child, now the scapegoated child, will go and do something mean to the other golden child. Now, what happens next? This is where the cycle closes. This is the end right here. Because the other child, okay, the golden child, they don't know how this whole thing started. They're pretty confused. They're not quite sure why the parent is not treating the one child well. The kid doesn't know. It doesn't make sense to him. He's like, we're kind of the same. Why does he, And so the child is, again, he's a meaning making machine, and he's a comparison machine. So he's trying to figure out why. Why does the parent treat this kid better or worse than his sibling worse than him? Why is that? He's trying to think, am I smarter? This is what children do. They try to think, well, what's the reason? Why did they get divorced? Why did they treat me better? And so then the scapegoat will go, and he's angry, and he's going to do something bad to the other child. Now here's where it ends, because the golden child's like, no wonder the parent treats this kid bad. He's no good. And the scapegoated child, who's been brainwashed from birth to think that maybe this other one is not good, that he's better than him, finally there's proof. There's straight up proof. And the golden child's like, that kid is no good. I understand mommy and daddy are right. This kid is a problem. He's mean. He's going to hurt me. Whenever mommy and daddy are there, he's not going to be nice to me. This is not fair. This is bullshit. My mom and dad are right. They are very smart. My mom and dad know this kid is a problem. And of course, as the kid gets older, this becomes more pronounced. And the scapegoated child will often, what we see the dynamic is they get into drugs, they get arrested, they are thrown in, they go to prison. Yeah, again, if it's a female, often teen pregnancy, or if it's a male, teen pregnancy of his girlfriend, not going to truancy, test scores, college education, all these things are affected. And of course, suicide, more serious things, and also risk-taking is often, the anger is so great for the scapegoated child that it's so unfair, because what happens is everybody turns on him, but his siblings the worst, because they know that he's bad. Like, they actually believe it. The father is just trying to ignore his own shame. But the other children, they know that kid is no good. And they're going to take that for the rest of their life as they go about living. Now, of course, this is like absolute poison when you're raising children. If you want to have children that don't like each other, if you want to ruin people's lives who care about you, you can go ahead, do this thing, ignore this thing. But there is no ignoring the reality that happens in the end, is lives are ruined. And it's my thesis is that what's happening now is a very similar dynamic. And I don't think men understand what's happening. And I know that women don't understand. And I hope that this realization that I had helps to get the discussion rolling. Because I really believe that this is a very serious thing. And I don't think it's about, again, this is not about men's empowerment, okay, any more than it's about the empowerment of the scapegoat child. Because the whole dynamic is bad. In fact, studies show that the golden child actually often has a more difficult time coming to grips with reality, and often exaggerates themselves, their own importance, and has very low empathy for other people. And that ends up having a negative effect on their life too. So it's not like the golden child gets the good stuff and the scapegoat gets screwed. This is a negative, miserable dynamic that ruins lives and ruins families. And so I want to bring this to attention, that I believe this is essentially what's happening to men, is by neglect, by default, men are being A, ignored, B, not supported, not given the love, not given the support, and even worse, called toxic, called negative, and they're being demonized in modern society. And again, this is at the level of a belief now. Women believe this about men. People believe this. This is different than, again, the child who, when the scapegoat comes and beats them up when their parents aren't there, at that point, it's a belief. It's no longer like not sure. It's like, that kid is no good. He's mean. Fuck that kid, right? That's a belief. I believe that's where society is today with men. Is that it's way past this other stuff. It's to the point where it's not about calling men toxic. There is a belief based on the facts in their lives that men are bad and need to be either A, in jail, controlled, and that basically men's suicide doesn't matter. The anger goes, it is absolutely, it's unreal how far it's gotten. But I think if you understand this dynamic, you will understand why the men's movement, one, is so bad at explaining itself. Women, it's very difficult. I mean, even if you first hear about it, even my friends, they're like, what the hell? You got a channel about like the men's movement, like men's rights? Well, what the fuck is that? You know, like, come on, man. It's at a belief level. So I ask you to open your mind and open your heart. And even this is for guys too, because a lot of men don't really understand what they've been through. They don't really understand the way that they are being demonized and the way how that affects their life. It affects their actions, just like the scapegoated child. It affects the reality of their life. So to go back and heal from all this stuff, it's a lot of work. And some people are in better situations than others. And again, this is like a kind of an introductory realization of this dynamic. And my love goes out to you guys, because this is not easy stuff. And I feel very grateful I had this realization this morning, because I think this is the heart of it. I really do. You want to ask yourself, what is the men's movement, and why are guys so bad at explaining it? It's because it's complex. Because most guys, I know, even listening to this channel, most guys, they supported feminism. They want women to be fair. Guys on my channel do not want to be paid more than women. Guys want fair. They want things to be equal. The problem is that this dynamic is going on, and they are being utterly destroyed as human beings. And they can't even understand. Men cannot even understand what is happening to them. And the consequences of being treated this way. Because the consequences cause you to destroy your own life. And that's what I want to stop. I think you have that is a good place to start for men, is to realize that it's not about the other people now. It's about you. What are you going to do? You realize this stuff is deeper than you thought. This stuff is more negative. You realize it's more complex. I would say go back to the drawing board and don't blame, start to think and start to heal. This is really where it's at. And if somebody, I'm just going to say the last thing. If somebody has a belief about you, okay, you can't change that. Like the belief other people have about you, don't go on the defensive against this one. Go to healing first. Go to understanding and healing yourself. And I think that is the difference between the men's movement and the women's movement, is that men are literally being crushed and destroyed and in a very, very, very cold and callous way, because they're being trained to destroy themselves, essentially. And men are doing the favor for this whole purpose. They're out there doing things, taking risks. I know I did. Doing things negative to themselves, confused, angry. It does not help anybody. And that's the thing. It's not good for anybody. In the end, we need each other. Human beings need each other. We're on this planet together. And if men are being destroyed and women don't take that seriously, maybe it'll take a whole generation. But as a men, this is why men are walking away. Maybe they don't exactly understand what I just articulated. I think I'm the first person to actually articulate what the real dynamic of the men's movement, what the real driver is, and why this channel is growing, why there's people who are so loyal and really love this stuff, is because this stuff is incredibly painful for men, and it's incredibly confusing. So part of my job is to try to figure it out and try to explain it. So I'm sure I did it imperfect, but I did my best with my realization this morning. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. And you women that are still listening, good on you. And let this one sit in your mind. Take time. These things are meaningful. All right. Thanks for watching.